Welcome everyone to today's VAS webinar titled 8 Characteristics That Can Define Field Profitability. I'm Chris Clark, a certified crop advisor for VAS Laboratory, coming to you from Wisconsin. I'm representing our testing labs of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska, who together processed soil from 50 states and 38 countries last year. I also represent a skilled team of VAS crop consultants with expertise in soil sampling, precision ag, scouting, and regulations for manure nutrient management plans. As you listen to today's webinar, you can use the chat box to submit questions at any time. We also will continue with a live Q&A after the webinar with Kate in the background as moderators on the questions. Today, my coworker Haley and I are going to share with you 8 things that your crop field is telling you right now about its future performance. So pay attention, the crop that you're growing this season deserves it. Just a note, many of you may have known us as AgSource Laboratories, and we continue to blend and join forces with our sister company to now operate under the name VAS. Together with their agricultural software expertise like DairyComp under the Pulse platform and our state-of-the-art laboratory equipment and extensive amounts of data, we have so much to provide our valued clients now and into the future. Thank you so much for joining us. We know your time is very valuable, and we want you to know that our experts have spent a lot of time collaborating together on this webinar for you. As a reminder, this presentation can be used for CCA continuing ed credits. You will self-report 1 crop management CEU, and just take note of the date, the presenters' names, and the title on the screen right now. Also, a short survey will pop up when you exit the Zoom webinar today. And for those continuing ed credits, completion of the survey will certify that you attended this webinar. Then watch your email inbox for a follow-up email just for the people attending and watching today. Note, we will be recording this webinar and share the link afterward. That about covers the housekeeping items and has allowed a little bit more time for people to join us. It is now time for the VAS webinar, 8 characteristics that can define field profitability. I really love this quote from entrepreneur Howard Buffett. Each of us has about 40 chances to accomplish our goals in life. I learned this first through agriculture, because all farmers can really expect is to have about 40 growing seasons in their lifetime or your job or career before it's passed on to the next generation, giving you exactly 40 chances to improve on every harvest. Agronomy is really complex. There are 3 main factors that account for the yield differences from one region to the next, even worldwide. First, technology factors. These are the differences in agricultural practices. For example, differences in planting, tillage, seed genetics, spraying, and fertility from one farm to the next. With this also comes the technology gap. What is available in one country versus another, and the speed of the adoption of each of those technologies. Second, biological factors. This includes what diseases, insects, pests, and weeds are present in your local fields versus another location. Third, environmental factors. For example, the local climatic conditions, your temperature that may be normal, when is your first frost and your last frost, what is your typical rainfall or snow amounts, local topography, soil depth, and water quality that might be used for irrigation. This part of agronomy is complex, is because all of these are interacting together and influence your yield either up or down. Just take a look at this diagram. It shows some of the factors that may affect your yield. We've got soil, seed, yield losses, fertility, and the environment, with things branching off of each of them. And we always know that Mother Nature throws in a twist from one season to the next unexpectedly. Today, we're going to look at what each field can tell you about its unique yield potential. This may be a slightly different approach than you've maybe heard before, because some of the characteristics that we're going to cover today maybe have been forgotten over time, but are worthwhile to revisit today. What your crop yield is connected to your profit, and your profits ensure your continued farming. To begin our journey, My coworker, Haley Sand, is a nutrient management and GPS specialist for the VAS consulting team. She's going to share her expertise with us. She has her master's from the University of Wisconsin, is a Wisconsin and Minnesota CCA, and is 4R certified. On a typical day, Haley is consulting for dairy and crop farms that she works with, and each spring and fall, she's out soil sampling or collecting tissue samples. So let's dive right into defining a profitable field. And also a note, these eight items are not listed in any particular order. Over to you, Haley.
Thanks, Chris. First on our list is a field's grid soil sample data. We still have growers that are not utilizing grid soil sampling. Today, grid soil sampling is quickly becoming a must. Why, you ask? Soil and yields are not created equal. The best or highest yielding areas of your fields probably have been the best areas year after year. The same is true for poorer yielding areas. Nonetheless, we continue to plant and apply fertilizer at a uniform rate across the field. This variability is naturally how soil was created, with varying deposition, different microclimates, environmental factors, etc., all of which account for how fertile your soils are. A soil's fertility is also influenced by how long a field has been in production agriculture, including past management practices during that time frame. Grid soil sampling, whether it's 1, 2.5, or 5 acre grids, is a foundation that starts putting the complex soil fertility pieces together and gets you one step closer to getting more out of each field, or the greater puzzle. Remember, each field is its own puzzle with its own pieces. Here's a common scenario across farm fields. You've done composite soil sampling every 4 years and continued with a standard fertility program for MAP and potash. But you've noticed slowly declining yields over time, or yield that has plateaued, or yield that is no longer increasing like it used to. How do we fix it? It's time to solve this with grid soil sampling. Here's an example where GPS grid soil sampling was utilized. A central Wisconsin dairy farm had an 80-acre field which always produced a poor corn silage crop. But why? The field was grid soil sampled for the first time using a 2.5-acre grid by a VAS consulting soil sampler. They found 50 of the 80 acres was identified to have very low pH, where previously the composite samples identified the field's pH as optimum, and little to no lime was recommended. With the GPS grid samples, the VAS crop consultant created VRT REX to spread lime and raise the pH in only the specified areas based on the soil results. As a result, 3 years later, the entire field yielded quality silage for the cows. The 80 acres averaged 720 tons at $32 per ton, or just over $23,000 in income. With an initial investment of the VRT lime application of just under $7,000, yet income increased by over $200 an acre, or a grand total of $16,000. In these cases, crops have mined out the best areas of the field purely from crop removal year after year. After grid soil sampling, field variability can be eye-opening and even seen before the soil test results come back. This coming season, your crop deserves a closer look using GPS soil sampling. A field soil test results is second on our list. Picture me this. Imagine you're in your combine, harvesting your best performing cornfield, watching that yield monitor as the bushels are rolling in. But regardless of how flat or how uniform a field appears, we don't have uniform yield. That yield monitor fluctuates up and down, just like the picture shows. The same concept applies to the field fertility in the soil. You apply manure and commercial fertilizer for the crops you grow, but ultimately it is still up to the soil to deliver the nutrients to the plant. Soils have different abilities to deliver nutrients needed for the optimum growth of a specific crop. Some make it easy to farm, allowing you to make some mistakes without much yield effect. Others are less forgiving. Soil fertility is one of the most important factors in crop yield, which is determined by a soil's physical, chemical, and biological attributes. Soils are either the source or gatekeeper of 17 key plant nutrients we at VAS Laboratories all know by heart. The lack of these nutrients in the soil causes deficiencies in plants, whereas the excess leads to toxicities, either of which have negative impacts on corn yields. Do you know what soil tests are important? How about what your soil test values are? Are they at optimum levels, or are you building or even mining your soils? Here is what to specifically look at from your recent soil tests to define a profitable field. pH. Soil pH is an important factor in determining your soil's ability to make nutrients available or not. Know the ideal pH range for each of the crops you grow. For most egg crops, 6 to 7 is ideal. Looking at the chart to the right, we have highlighted the optimum pH level. However, you will see that not all nutrients are most available within the optimum range. The wider the band, the more available the nutrient is. Here's a great visual of the median pH level across the United States from the International Plant Nutrient Institute. The blue in color represents higher pH or more alkaline, whereas the redder the area, the lower or more acidic the pH is. So then, what does pH have to do with yield? Well, actually a lot. Low pH significantly affects crop growth. And remember our grid soil sampling example? We found 50 acres in that 80-acre field that had positive response to liming and increased overall income by $200 an acre. Here's a chart that goes over how pH affected yield. In particular, look at the alfalfa we've highlighted at the bottom of the chart. You can see that yield at a pH of 6.8 is 100, whereas if we decrease the pH down to 5.7, it cuts our yield in half. Ouch. That won't fill the silo or bunker on the dairy, nor does the haylage have the proper quality to produce milk. Here's another table from research that the Fertilizer Institute conducted showing global examples of percent yield increase following a VRT lime application. Again, we're going to look at alfalfa. So highlighted is the alfalfa grown in Argentina. And here they had a 61% yield increase with a lime application. That's telling us liming is a big deal. So the next result to look at after pH is CEC, or cation exchange capacity. Some farmers will soil test and look at CEC before renting or purchasing land. Why? CEC is directly related to soil texture, or the concentration of sand, silt, and clay, and is pretty difficult to alter in a significant manner. Look at the chart on the right. Low numbers reveal coarse soil texture, whereas high numbers are those with finer soil texture or greater clay content. Looking at CEC helps with getting max efficiency out of your irrigation, fertilizer, manure, nutrients, and herbicide applications. The only way CEC can be determined is by conducting a soil test. So CEC does not come on all soil test packages, so be sure to ask for this from the lab. The basic concept to remember is CEC indicates how well a soil holds on to anything applied to it and how difficult it is for plants to obtain. Soils with low CEC hold on to very little, so you must split apply, including water and fertilizer. In other words, when putting all your nutrients on in one application, the soil cannot hold onto it and store it for later plant uptake. As a result, nutrients are lost. So here, spoon feeding is your better option. In contrast, when applying nutrients to high CEC soils or clay soils, due to their naturally slow infiltration rate, it's best to incorporate or slowly irrigate these. CEC is important to think about when deciding things like which fields can have nitrogen applied in the fall versus which fields should have nitrogen applied in the spring. While this is not common where I live in the Midwest, salinity is a problem affecting crop production in other areas. In 1987, Mengele and Kirkby found that salinity was one of the more important soil factors affecting yield. In the world, about 20% of cultivated land and 33% of irrigated land are salt affected. So what does salinity have to do with growing crops? Well, under normal conditions, the higher osmotic pressure in plant cells permits the absorption of water and essential nutrients from a soil solution into the root cells. Salinity affects that osmotic pressure, where moisture is held in the soil rather than being absorbed by the plants, and therefore having negative yield effects. So here's a map showing the type and severity of salt-affected soils across the world. The darker pink, blue, and purple areas should be testing for salinity in their soil. After pH, CEC, and salinity, we're going to take a look at organic matter. Due to the numerous, complex, and interacting factors, it is also difficult to establish a direct cause-effect relationship between crop yield and organic matter content. But a global meta-analysis performed by Oldfield in 2018 indicated potential yield increases of 10% plus or minus 11% for corn and 23% plus or minus 37% for wheat from increasing soil organic matter content. In contrast, several studies have suggested no effects of soil organic matter content on crop yield and have supported the hypothesis that it is difficult to separate the effects of soil organic matter on crop yield from those of nutrients and other parameters. Yet organic matter is important to look at because of what it influences related to crop needs. Organic matter is important to know because it is the main driver to water availability and retention. An increase in organic matter by 1% increases water retention by 1 acre inch, or up to 10% of the soil's water holding capacity. A Michigan study demonstrated potential crop yield increases of about 12% for every 1% organic matter in soil. Additionally, Maryland researchers saw an increase of approximately 80 bushels of corn per acre when organic matter increased from 0.8 to 2%. That's a lot. How much organic matter is good? At the lab, we know organic matter has been trending down for some time. Organic matter has fallen from around 5 or 6 to less than 3% on most ag land. It is easy to break down organic matter without knowing it. Each time the soil is tilled, oxygen is stirred into the soil, stimulating decomposition and accelerating the loss of organic matter, and less residue is left in fields by high-yielding crops. We do know some general guidelines. 2% organic matter in a sandy soil is very good, but difficult to reach. Yet a clay soil at the same 2% indicates a greatly depleted situation. Some healthy soils have achieved 0.1% increase annually, but we can expect this to be much slower on depleted soils, taking upwards of 5 or more years. Pictured to the right is a study including over 60 years of land use data. In summary, we know much of the land has been farmed longer than this, but the data show the following. The hilltops are eroded and have thinner topsoil with less soil organic matter. The low-lying areas receiving the eroded soil now has deeper topsoil and more soil organic matter. So the takeaway here is fields or parts of fields, if you do grid sampling, can be identified and where the lowest organic matter is, and they can definitely benefit from some field practices such as like no-till. So next is nitrogen. But wait, I see phosphorus, potassium, and organic matter on my test. Where's the nitrogen analysis? Well, actually, nitrogen is tied to organic matter. Well-managed soils result in 20 to 30 units of N from each % of organic matter. In ideal soil conditions, considering temperature and moisture level, this can increase to 40 units of N per acre. In other words, the speed of the nitrogen cycle, or the rate at which soil bacteria break down organic matter and create nitrogen, goes faster when soil moisture and temperature are ideal. So a healthy soil is essential to a healthy nitrogen cycle. Dr. Fred Below, plant physiologist and professor with the University of Illinois, found that when combined, all of these factors contribute to big yield gains. They include weather, nitrogen or fertility, hybrid selection, previous crop, plant population, tillage, and growth regulators. Specifically, 50% of corn yield was determined by the first two, weather and nitrogen. Once you maintain optimum soil test levels for N, P, and K, then you can begin to look at what's next, micronutrients. Not named micro because they aren't as important, but named as essential micros because they are needed, just in smaller amounts. Another way of putting it is by looking at Liebig's law of minimum, or the diagram to the right. Take out one of the micronutrients, or a stave in the barrel, and your yield begins to diminish, or the water begins to pour out of the barrel. Micronutrients promote the strong, steady growth of crops that produce higher yields and increased harvest quality, maximizing a plant's genetic potential. Another one of Dr. Belo's research findings was that making the right application of phosphorus, sulfur, and zinc can boost corn yield. Next, my coworker Chris will continue the exploration of the final factors affecting yield in the field. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Haley, for all that interesting research tied to the soil tests. I think many people listening are going to look a little bit closer at their soil results after the webinar. If not, think about maybe adding that calcium and magnesium test so that they can get the CEC, or looking at the micros if they've really nailed down their N, P, and K in their fields. That's the next thing to look at. So number 3 on our list for our webinar is another way to know exactly what your crop is getting from the soil is with in-season tissue test results. A plant tissue test is going to tell you what the plant is obtaining from the soil in that exact location. So plant tissue testing is really best combined with a recent soil test. Then you can troubleshoot both things. You'll look at the plant tissue and what nutrients are in the soil. Another really common practice is submitting plant tissue samples from a high yielding area and then comparing that to one that has more of a low yield, and then comparing the results. Growers do see the most return on investment from plant tissue testing early in the season. This allows them to identify any limiting nutrients, and then you have about a 2 to 4 week window to make corrections on any deficiencies before they affect the yield. These growers are no longer guessing. Instead, they're using precise analytics with their tissue tests in hand. Again, it's also really helpful to use an in-field check strip if they've done any type of micronutrient application. This then will reveal if your crop is responding in that field to that micronutrient application. At a rough cost of about $1 to $2 per acre, tissue tests can help increase your yield while reducing unnecessary input costs. Customers really do love the VAS plant tissue report. Here it is on the screen. Each of those key plant nutrients are visually graphed and then ranked as either low, optimal, or high. If your result is low, that means you need to apply fertilizer now. We can't give you a recommendation because we don't know any of the past history, so it's something to work with your agronomist on. If your result is optimal, you should continue with your current fertilizer plan. If it is high, no additional fertilizer is needed. The top line shows what your actual laboratory result is that was graphed on the bottom. In the middle of the report are the normal ranges for the crop that has been chosen. We can test anything from apples to zucchini and everything in between at the lab. And it is also becoming really popular to have multiple samples throughout the growing season. If that was to happen, this would be the report that you would see. So for example, a weekly tissue testing program on a 2,000 acre dairy farm was used to watch nutrients for their corn silage fields. The farm was able to learn that nitrogen was in excess all season, but their boron and zinc was testing low 6 of the 12 times that they tested. What the farm did was, for the following season, they lowered their nitrogen rates, and they shifted some of the money that they saved on the less nitrogen to add a boron and zinc into their starter. The farm is going to continue with the weekly tissue testing program, and they're expanding it to their alfalfa fields this year. Give more tissue testing some thought this season on your farm. One of Dr. Fred Belo's main contributors to big yield gains in his research was the previous crop in the field. That's number 4. Look at the previous crop credit chart on the slide. Once again, we've highlighted the crop alfalfa. Alfalfa ranged anywhere from 0 to 150 pounds of nitrogen credit based on the stand density and the age. Crop credits do vary regionally, so look at your your local university research, but make sure that you're taking advantage of them each year by matching the right crop with each field in your crop rotation. This will make the previous crop credit do some of the work and contribute to your yield next year. The number 5 item for what your field can tell you about profitability right now is its depth of soil. As seen in this picture, many regions in the Corn Belt are blessed with topsoil several feet deep. The deepest soils are those colored bluish gray, while the thinner soils are colored tan or brown. Iowa State research showed that the A horizon, or your topsoil, when it is increased from 1.5 inches to 5 inches, can increase the corn yield 13 bushels per acre. So we said before, some places have feet deep of soil. So the thicker your topsoil, usually the better your yield with good management. On to number 6, keeping your soil covered. Over time, it is sad to think that some of your best topsoil has already been eroded or left your field. It also could have been moved and is now in a low-lying area where it used to be on a hill. People who say cover crops don't pay have never really done the math. Imagine what cutting inputs of 30 to 80% can do over time for your bottom line. When I attended the 2019 Wisconsin Cover Crops Conference, I heard the keynote speaker, Rick Clark. And while what he's done on his farm over 8 to 9 years isn't necessarily for everyone, it definitely ties together how keeping soil covered defines a profitable field. Rick Clark is definitely a numbers guy. He farms in Indiana and has 7,000 acres where he is growing corn, soybeans, and wheat. He plants corn and beans into no-till into a living crop of cereal rye. The rye keeps moisture in the soil. It also prevents weeds and captures nutrients that are sequestered while it grew. Eventually, the rye is killed and it decomposes, returning those nutrients to the next cash crop. Clark's strategy has allowed for impressive reductions in input costs. Like I said, he's a numbers guy. He has less tillage and because of less tillage, he's burned half of the diesel fuel in 2018 than he did in 2011. His nitrogen fertilizer went from 220 pounds to per acre to 110. His MAP use went down 91%, and he completely stopped applying potash and lime. His chemical cost for 2018 was $18 per acre, and for 2019, he ballparked it about $5. For the operation his size, he added it up and it was $632,000 in savings. And one really cool thing that he also does is he has in his crop rotation something called a regen year, where Clark sacrifices any profits from that field as just to grow a cover crop, and it's a mixture of a cover crop, to allow the soil to rebuild. Number 7 is drainage, and drainage can definitely affect your yield. This is a really good diagram of how a soil crust can affect your drainage. A soil crust will occur when there's poor soil health. For more information on soil health, I encourage you to view our on-demand VAS webinar on soil health. What happens is an unhealthy soil has aggregates, and those begin to break down, and they easily clog the pores in the soil. Those pores are usually filled with air and water. Instead, it creates a crust on top, where your recent rainfall or even irrigation has nothing to do but pond or run off the surface instead of infiltrating down into the root zone for that crop to use in between times of rain or in case of a drought. Globally, flooding is one of the most damaging crop stresses besides drought. In 2019, flood damage caused $8 billion in damage across the United States. Recent research also indicates that climate change is resulting in more extreme weather events, such as flooding, and that all negatively affects your yield and your profit. Poor drainage does promote soil nitrogen losses through runoff, leaching, and denitrification. Again, all lost money. Some potential management practices include flood-tolerant varieties, adjusting your management practices, installing tile drainage, and then some adaptive nutrient management strategies to improve your soil health. Again, look up this VAS Soil Health webinar. It's a good one. And number 8, we have soil compaction. According to the University of Wisconsin research, compacted soil can cut crop yield as much as 50%. That's pretty scary. Compacted soils do not drain properly, and they restrict root development and nutrient uptake by the roots, and ultimately impacting your yield. The number one cause for soil compaction is getting into your fields at the wrong time when it's too wet. So be patient and wait for conditions to be right in your fields. British farm trials in the UK in 2009 found 10% less fuel is used, and there's an 11% reduction of time spent in the field on operations without compaction issues. Without compaction, your soil has a better increase in soil biological activity and productivity. You'll see more even emergence of your crop after planting, and you'll improve your soil water absorption and storage in between rainfall events. You can expect yield gains of 5 to 15% in corn, soybean, and wheat is realistic, as well as more profitable. So there you have it. We gave you 8 characteristics that a field can tell you right now, even if it's covered with snow, about its future performance. I'll now bring Haley back in to recap her portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Chris. Our takeaway messages for building a profitable field, in other words, the main puzzle pieces that go into the profitable field puzzle, again in no particular order, include: first was GPS grid soil sampling, which is used to identify good and bad yielding areas and bridge the yield gap between them. Second was a field soil test results, in particular pH, which controls what nutrients are plant available or not; CEC, which tells us how strong the soil is at holding those nutrients; salinity, which affects water and nutrient absorption from soil solution; organic matter, influencing water availability and can be considered a soil's natural nitrogen source; and micronutrients, which are still essential but needed in smaller amounts.
And number 3 was using your in-season tissue tests. Remember, those tissue tests will reveal what the crop is getting from the soil. They're best combined with a recent soil test or having a sample from a good yielding area versus a poor yielding area to find what differences are in that particular field. Number 4 was the previous crop. The previous crop was one of Dr. Belo's major contributors to big gain because of the nitrogen credit. Be sure to use the previous crop credit to your advantage in your crop rotation this season for a little added help from your soil. Number 5 was the depth of soil. The map in the slideshow showed how some people benefit from having really deep soil, and it can vary across the states, but research confirms that the deeper the topsoil, the better the yield. Number 6 was keeping your soils covered. The use of cover crops or other cropping methods in your crop rotation contributes to your bottom line and will promote keeping the most productive, high-yielding topsoil from eroding and leaving your field while absorbing more water for your crop in between rainfall events or during a drought. Drainage is a global problem, and poor drainage also promotes that nitrogen loss, which translates to lost money and lost yield. There are multiple best management practices like improving soil health to help your fields drain better. And number 8 was compaction. Compaction is definitely a hidden underground yield robber, and the only way is to prevent compaction. So please wait for your field conditions to be right in your field. Don't worry about the farmer on the other end of town who is already out in his fields. And for a little bit more food for thought, here are a couple other things that we talked about in preparing this webinar, as compared to what your field now can tell you about profitability. What is the distance of that field from your farm? How about the distance to the mill? What is your rent price? What was your purchase price? What is the actual size of that field? And can your larger equipment maneuver easily in that field today? Is irrigation present or not? And maybe it's time to invest in irrigation. So overall, we threw a lot of things at you, but we want to explain that agronomy is really complex, farming is complex, and profitability is complex too. Every piece to this complex puzzle, we hope we gave you some things to investigate before planting to put more money in your pocket, because we love working with farmers just like you. Thank you for attending today's VAS webinar. Reminder CCAs to self-report the webinar as one CEU using the speaker's names, title, and date, and then complete the survey when you exit the webinar after the Q&A. Watch for a follow-up email with resources just for our attendees. And then please make sure to contact us with any additional questions that you might have after you log off. Most of all, thank you for signing up, participating, and we can't wait to see you at the next VAS webinar.
Okay, we did have quite a few questions come in, so I'm just going to go down the list in the order that they came in. The first question is, rather than grid sampling, can you speak to using an EC sled to map a zone or map a field, then sampling respective zones? And the user did say, forgive my incorrect or correct terminology.
Yeah, I guess I can talk a little bit about that one. We at VAS, we have had some growers request that, and we can do that. There is a shorter window of time that you can, get that sled out there and map those fields, and it is pretty reliant on getting good information from the sled based on your field conditions. So if the soil's too dry while you're out in the field, or the soil's too wet, it kind of can deter some of the results from the EC mapping or electrical conductivity. But it is kind of doing a similar thing. It's looking looking back at bouncing back off of, what is that soil texture that's out there, and it does really create a good map. It's kind of like you have to do it one time. It's a one-time investment. So it could be something that if you have available in your area, or if you've not done it, that will really create a more detailed zone, and I don't know the numbers on it, but it could be pretty comparable to maybe going down to a 1 acre grid or something like that. So interesting question. Thanks for bringing that up.
One thing I would note anytime that we're using technology and whatnot is just remember nothing beats a human eye. Just getting out there and looking at it. Technology is useful for getting some background and general information and areas to target. So you still need to go out and assess. That's, with sensors, EC mapping, all of it.
Great,
Next
thank
question.
you. The next question is, can manure applications increase organic matter?
I would say over time, it's not going to happen tomorrow. So it definitely depends on how much dry matter you have in your manure sample. So it's not to have a simple question or a simple answer, but over time there is a possibility. It totally depends on the health of your soil as well.
Yeah, I would say manure is better than no manure. So it's definitely doing something.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. Another question, is it always 20 to 30 units of nitrogen to 1% organic matter, or can you / would you want to test for nitrogen specifically?
Yeah, so the 20 to 30 units of N is very dependent on soil temperature and moisture. You need to have, the right temperature between 60 and 80 is the soil microbes happy zone. So they can crank out nitrogen faster, but you also have to consider moisture. If it's too dry or if it's too wet, it's going to affect the nitrogen cycle as well. So again, it's not a simple answer, but that's where soils are varying, and every year is a little bit different. I can definitely suggest taking samples every, couple years. So about every 4 years is when we suggest to resample. You could potentially see a difference in organic matter for that as well.
While we're on the topic of organic matter, we did just have one more question come in, so we'll stay on that topic. What do you believe to be the best median to increase organic matter in soil, since manure is not the best?
Ooh, I do encourage that person to watch that soil health webinar, because in there, Dr. Jim Friedrichs goes through a whole list of things that will increase organic matter and things that might promote losing it. A couple of things is when Haley spoke, that tillage, reducing any type of tillage can really help. Putting some small grains into your crop rotation, or a perennial like alfalfa, where you can leave it in the ground a little bit longer than just one season, like a corn and soybean rotation. But yeah, it was a really long list. Maybe Haley can add a few more.
Yeah, so like tillage radishes, kind of more natural tillage in that aspect, or even like using those small grains as a cover crop to keep those like root channels open. Yeah, those are the ones that are quick coming to me at the moment.
Thank you. Now moving on to plant tissue tests. What, or excuse me, how early can tissue samples be done on oats?
Yeah, so if you're thinking about doing any type of the grasses, so oats and wheat, you can collect the whole plant. So that's up to you as far as when it's emerged. Just when you cut from the whole plant, just brush off any of the soil that may have bounced off after a recent snow or recent rainfall. But yeah, we have gotten very small plants come in, and then there are guidelines. If you we'll send out one of those as a resource as the best time to take a tissue sample, and then other sampling techniques. So I would say anywhere from emergence and then up to about 6 inches. Then you have to look at collecting a different sample after that.
It also gets to be like, as far as time frame, like how late are you considering doing a Hail Mary application? So early on, totally fine. You're still able to drive out there and whatnot. It gets to be how much crop do you want to drive over once we get into maturity. So just another little tidbit to think of.
Next question regarding plant tissue tests. What is the ideal amount of time in between taking plant tissue tests samples?
Well, I'd say you definitely don't want to do like every day. Chris, I know you're going to say something, so I'll let you hop in.
Yeah, we have some that are doing each week, kind of like that example was in there, but you have to really be committed to doing that. We also have some crop consultants that they try to do an additional plant tissue during like that crop's main growth stages. So like for corn, there's 3 different ones. They'll do one like where it's the whole plant while it's underneath a foot tall. Then when it grows and doesn't have the ear yet, you collect a different leaf. And then when it does have the ear, then you collect the corn ear leaf. So I've seen people do those 3 main stages. We can work with you depending on different crops, to set up kind of what some industry practices are, but it is kind of crop dependent.
Perfect, thank you. Just a couple more questions so far, unless we get more come in. What are advised ways to combat present compaction in fields without the use of heavy tillage?
So I think I had read that question and was answering a previous question, but that's where using like the tillage radishes, keeping those root channels open, are some ways of getting in there. If you don't want to do heavy tillage, doing is like a ripper an option. Just kind of give that soil a little bit of a breath again. Not saying that tillage is bad. Sometimes we need tillage in order to get rid of a hard pan or surface compaction. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, and our final question, unless if you do have any more questions, feel free to submit them in the chat box or the Q&A box. But our final question that we have right now is, should soil samples be taken in the same coordinates in the same field in order to get a true perspective of historical soil health, fertility, and nutrient load?
So when I'm out soil sampling, it is really nice to go back to the exact same spots. That way I can give a true assessment of the soil analysis when it comes down to sitting down with the customer. I put down a soil test comparison sheet. We go over each one of those points, and I can do whether they want it each point or whether they want it done on a field basis. So essentially we've got the field name, we have the pH, did that increase? Are we building? Was there no change, or was there a decrease in soil test? Are we mining? And it goes on from pH, organic matter, phosphorus, and potassium, which are typically the main package that these customers are getting. Organic matter, I just more so have that on there as a reference because it is so hard to change. In my area, we've got really sandy soils, so if I get a 1.5, I'm super excited. But if we don't, that's fine too. We can make it work. So I would say it is really nice to be able to use those same points year after year to really see how it's changing. If you're not using the same points, you don't really get a true understanding of what has changed. You can get an overall like, okay, this field has slightly changed, but I'm not sure if that's because I sampled in a different spot or what. So anything else to add, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with what Haley's saying is, we do have some growers that are progressive and they've been using GPS soil sampling over several years, and that's the data you can really dig into. Seen some cool things where they maybe had an extreme weather event where there was flooding on one end of the field, and then all of a sudden, why did these soil points, they're kind of different than what our trend was before? Well, they had so much displaced soil that because of the topography, it put in a new kind of soil layer in that area, and it changed the soil test results. So having that background information and a little bit of the field history really helped that farm in that they had the GPS locations and the trend historical data.
Okay, thank you. That is all the questions that we have had submitted. We appreciate everyone for tuning in and submitting your questions, and I'll let Chris and Haley do the final send off.
Well, thanks everyone, and look for that follow-up email. And once again, thanks for your attention.
Feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email if you have any questions again, more so on a personal level. We are pretty much available anytime, or we'll get back to you if you call us kind of at the end of the day kind of a thing. So feel free, give a shout.